Tom Bower just uncovered something that changes everything we thought we knew about Meghan Markle. Not speculation, not gossip, actual printed evidence that's been sitting in plain sight for decades. A magazine from 1997 lists her age as 21. The problem, if her official birth year is correct, she should have been 15. That's a 6-year gap that can't be explained by a typo. And once you see this discrepancy, every major moment in her story, her Hollywood career, her royal entrance, like even the birth of her children suddenly demands a second look. By the end of this investigation, you'll understand why her father's testimony basically contradicts the palace timeline. Discover what medical professionals say about the Archie birth narrative that doesn't match standard hospital protocol, and see why this isn't just about age. It's about which version of Meghan Markle's past is real and which was carefully constructed for public consumption. But before we get to the smoking gun evidence, we need to understand something crucial about how public identities get built in the first place. Think about this for a moment. Every celebrity, every public figure operates with two parallel histories. There's the official version, the one printed in biographies, repeated in interviews, filed away in palace records, clean, consistent, easy to reference. But then there's the real version, the one that exists in actual documents, in memories of people who were there, in records created before anyone had a reason to pay attention. And when those two versions don't match, when the official story starts showing cracks under scrutiny, that's when you know something was adjusted along the way. Something was smoothed over. Something was rewritten to fit a narrative that works better than the messy truth. Now, here's what makes the Meghan Markle situation so fascinating and honestly so unsettling. We're not talking about minor inconsistencies or different people remembering events slightly differently. We're talking about foundational facts. Birth year, age during key life events, medical timelines, the kind of details that shouldn't have multiple versions because they're supposed to be fixed, verifiable, impossible to dispute. Yet somehow, in Meghan's case, these supposedly solid facts keep shifting depending on which source you're looking at. And the deeper Tom Bower dug into this mystery, the more he realised he wasn't chasing rumours. He was following a paper trail that led somewhere the palace never wanted anyone to look. So let me ask you something, and I want you to really think about this. When was the last time you questioned whether someone's age was actually what they claimed? Probably never, right? Because why would you? Age is one of those things we just accept. It's on your birth certificate, your driver's license, your passport. It's not something people lie about, especially not in a way that would require coordinating multiple official documents and maintaining that lie for decades. That's exactly what makes this story so compelling. If Meghan's age was adjusted, we're not talking about knocking off a year or two for vanity. We're talking about a systematic reconstruction of her entire timeline, done so thoroughly that it took a veteran investigative biographer years to piece together what actually happened. Let's start where Tom Bower started, with the most unexpected source of all, Thomas Markle, Meghan's father. Now, you might be thinking, isn't this the guy who's been estranged from his daughter for years? Can we even trust what he says? And that's a fair question. But here's the thing about Thomas that Bower noticed immediately. When Thomas talks about Meghan's childhood, he's not vague. He's not offering fuzzy memories or approximate dates. He talks about specific schools during specific years, theatre performances at particular ages, the moment she decided to pursue acting seriously, and how old she was when that happened. These aren't the kind of details a parent makes up or gets confused about. These are milestone memories, the kind that get locked into your mind because you were there, you marked them, you probably even took photographs. If Meghan was actually 21 in March 1997, let's do the math together. That would place her birth year somewhere around 1975 or 1976, which would make her approximately 49 or 50 years old right now. Not the 43 or 44 she's claimed to be. That's not a small discrepancy. That's not a rounding error or a simple mistake. That's a 6-year gap. 6 years of someone's life just gone, erased, redistributed across a timeline that was rewritten to make her younger than she actually is. And this is where your mind should be racing with questions, because mine certainly was when I first learned about this. If this is true, if Meghan really was born in the mid-70s rather than 1981, then everything we've been told about her life story shifts dramatically. Think about what this means. When she graduated from Northwestern University, the age she claimed to be wasn't her actual age. When she got her first roles on television, she was older than anyone knew. When she met Prince Harry, she wasn't a 36-year-old woman entering the royal family. She was potentially in her early 40s. And that detail, that specific number, would have massively changed how the British public, the media, and possibly even the palace itself perceived her and her relationship with Harry. But wait, you might be thinking, couldn't this just be a mistake by the magazine? Maybe someone at 17 got the number wrong, typed 21 instead of 15. And look, I understand that impulse to find an innocent explanation. We want to believe that major discrepancies like this have simple answers. But think about how magazines work. They don't just make up ages. They get information directly from the people they're featuring or from their representatives, especially in a spread like this, where they're showcasing aspiring talent. They're working from submitted materials. Someone provided that age to the magazine, either Meghan herself or her agent or whoever was managing her career at the time. And they said she was 21 in 1997. Here's what makes this even more interesting. Tom Bower didn't just find this one piece of evidence and call it a day. Once he discovered the 17 magazine entry, he went back through every available record he could find from that era. And what he found was a pattern. Not a smoking gun in every instance, but a consistent thread of Meghan being older than the official narrative suggested. References in theatre programmes, mentions in local newspapers covering school productions, dates on early acting credits that don't quite line up with when someone born in 1981 would have been doing those things. Individually, you could maybe explain away each discrepancy, but collectively, they paint a picture of someone whose real timeline was systematically adjusted to create a younger, more marketable version for public consumption. And this brings us to the question
We are
that should
moving
be haunting
forward
you right
with
now.
determination
The same question
and
that
hope.
drove Tom Bower to keep digging, even when the story got more complicated. Why would someone adjust their age by 6 years, not 2 years, which might be chalked up to vanity, not 1 year, which could be a record-keeping error? 6 years. That's deliberate, that's calculated, that's someone making a strategic decision to rewrite their history. And the only reason you make that kind of adjustment is because your real age creates a problem that your fake age solves. But here's where it gets even more interesting, and this is something most people haven't considered. The age adjustment doesn't just help in Hollywood, it fundamentally changes the story of how she and Harry met and fell in love. The official narrative presents Meghan as a 36-year-old woman when she married Harry, young enough to be seen as a breath of fresh air, old enough to be taken seriously. It's the perfect balance, but if she was actually 42 or 43, suddenly the dynamic shifts. Suddenly, she's significantly older than the image the palace was projecting. Suddenly, questions arise about biological timelines, about family planning, about how the public would perceive a prince marrying someone substantially older than the carefully curated image suggested. And this is where things get deeply uncomfortable, because now we're not just talking about a Hollywood career move. We're talking about a discrepancy that made it through royal vetting processes. The British royal family doesn't just accept new members without extensive background checks. They investigate, they verify, they have access to resources and information most of us can't even imagine. So either the palace discovered this discrepancy and decided to ignore it, which seems unlikely given how damaging it would be if exposed, or the adjustment was so thorough, so well documented across multiple official channels that even royal investigators accepted it as truth. Either scenario is stunning. Either the palace knew and covered it up, or the deception was sophisticated enough to fool one of the most scrutinizing institutions on the planet. Now, let me be clear about something, because I know what some of you are thinking. This is just speculation. You're building a conspiracy theory out of one magazine entry. And I get that concern, I really do. But here's what you need to understand. Tom Bower isn't some tabloid journalist throwing mud to see what sticks. He's an investigative biographer who's taken down billionaires and politicians with his meticulously researched exposés. The man doesn't publish unless he can defend every single claim in court if necessary. And he's not just relying on the 17 magazine entry. That was the breakthrough, the crack in the facade. But once he found it, he followed it everywhere it led. And it led to Thomas Markle's consistent testimony, to timeline inconsistencies in official records, to questions that palace representatives deflected rather than answered directly. But wait, because we're only halfway through this story, and what comes next is where things get truly strange. Because if Meghan's age timeline was adjusted, if her birth year was moved forward by 6 years, then we need to re-examine every major life event through this new lens. And there's one event in particular that's drawn more scrutiny, more questions, and more official silence than any other: the birth of Archie. And when you start looking at the details of how that birth was described, when you line up the official story against standard medical protocol, the narrative doesn't just bend, it shatters. The story the world received about Archie's birth was, let's be honest, almost cinematic in its perfection. Prince Harry described it in his memoir with the kind of detail that's meant to make you feel like you were there. The dim lighting, the calm energy, Meghan receiving 2 epidurals for pain management, a smooth, peaceful labour, and then the detail that should have raised immediate red flags but somehow didn't at the time. The couple leaving Portland Hospital and arriving home at Frogmore Cottage within 2 hours of the birth. 2 hours from delivery to home with a newborn after epidurals. Now, before I tell you what medical professionals said about this timeline, I want you to think about what you know about childbirth. Even if you've never personally experienced it, you've probably known people who have. You've heard the stories. Labour is unpredictable, messy, exhausting. Even in the best circumstances, even with the best medical care, it takes time. Recovery takes time. Evaluation takes time. Discharge processes take time. The idea that someone could go through labour, deliver a baby, recover sufficiently, be evaluated by doctors, complete all discharge paperwork, get dressed, pack up, travel an hour by car, and be settled at home within 2 hours of birth. That doesn't just sound unlikely, it sounds impossible. And according to multiple sources with knowledge of how Portland Hospital operates, it is impossible. Not difficult, not rare, impossible. Because Portland Hospital, one of London's most exclusive private medical facilities, has protocols. They have standards, they have legal obligations, and those protocols don't allow for what Harry described, no matter how much someone might want a quick private exit. Let me walk you through what medical professionals said when they read Harry's account, because this is where the official story doesn't just crack. It falls apart completely. First, the 2 epidurals. When doctors read that detail, they didn't just raise eyebrows, they said it makes no medical sense. An epidural isn't a pain pill you take twice, it's a continuous medication delivered through a catheter placed in your spine. Once it's in, it stays in, providing ongoing pain relief throughout labour. There is no medical reason, none whatsoever, to give a second epidural. If pain management is insufficient, doctors adjust the dosage through the existing line. They don't place a second epidural. That would be redundant at best and potentially dangerous at worst. The fact that 2 epidurals were mentioned at all suggests either a fundamental misunderstanding of how epidurals work or a detail that was added to make the story sound more medically involved than it actually was. Second, and this is crucial, we need to talk about risk categories. Meghan's pregnancy, regardless of which age timeline you believe, was automatically classified as high risk. If she was 37 at the time of Archie's birth, That alone puts her in a category requiring additional monitoring. If she was actually 43, which would be the case if the 1975 birth year is correct, then she would have been under even more intensive medical supervision. High-risk pregnancies don't get 2-hour turnarounds. They get extended observation periods. They get careful monitoring for complications like preeclampsia, hemorrhaging, blood pressure issues. The hospital doesn't just let you leave because you feel fine. They keep you until they're certain both mother and baby are stable. And that process takes significantly longer than 2 hours, especially when epidurals have been administered. Medical professionals who reviewed this timeline said the same thing almost universally. Under absolutely ideal conditions, with zero complications, with a mother who recovers unusually quickly, with expedited paperwork, you might get someone out of Portland Hospital in 4 to 6 hours after delivery. And that would be considered remarkably fast. 2 hours isn't fast. It's fictional. It's a timeline that works in a story, but not in reality. And yet that's the timeline we were given, presented as fact, included in Harry's memoir as if it were completely normal and uncontroversial. But wait, there's more, because Harry's account didn't just describe a fast exit. It described a specific environment during labour that raises additional questions. He mentioned elements like dim lighting, calm music, a peaceful atmosphere. These details, while lovely in concept, don't align with how high-risk births are typically managed. When there's elevated risk, when the mother's age or health conditions require extra vigilance, hospitals prioritise monitoring over ambience. You get bright lights so medical staff can see clearly. You get continuous fetal monitoring. You get frequent checks of vital signs. The spa birth experience Harry described is something you might request for a low-risk, uncomplicated delivery. It's not something that happens when doctors are closely watching for potential complications that come with advanced maternal age. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is how institutions manage information when truth becomes inconvenient. And make no mistake, the truth about Meghan's age, if it differs from the official version, would have been spectacularly inconvenient for everyone involved. So for Meghan, obviously, because it would undermine her entire public identity. For Harry, because it would suggest he'd been deceived about something fundamental. For the palace, because it would raise questions about their vetting procedures and why they either missed or ignored evidence. The path of least resistance, the choice that avoids multiple disasters, is to accept the official story and close ranks around it, which is exactly what appears to have happened. Tom Bower's investigation into Meghan's age isn't ultimately about her. It's about the reliability of information in an age where image management has become so sophisticated that truth becomes optional for those with enough resources to maintain an alternative version. It's about the ease with which official narratives can diverge from reality when institutions decide that reality is too messy, too complicated, too damaging to their carefully constructed images. It's about the fragility of trust. When you realize that the facts you thought were solid, verifiable, impossible to dispute, are actually just stories that nobody with power had reason to challenge. And so we're left with questions. Is Meghan Markle actually 6 years older than she claims? Did the palace know and cover it up? Was the Archie birth narrative adjusted to hide complications that would have revealed age-related risks? We don't have definitive answers. What we have is evidence that demands those questions be asked. Evidence that suggests the official version isn't the whole story. Evidence that points to a reconstruction so thorough that it took a veteran investigative biographer years to piece together the cracks. The truth may never come out fully. Meghan has no incentive to admit an age adjustment, even if one occurred. The palace has every reason to maintain the official narrative they've already endorsed. The documents that could definitively prove or disprove the discrepancy are locked away, inaccessible to journalists and investigators. We may be left forever in this space where the evidence suggests something was adjusted but falls short of absolute proof, where the contradictions are too significant to ignore but not quite sufficient to force acknowledgement. Tom Bower's investigation won't bring us closure. It won't give us the satisfying moment where everything clicks into place and the truth is finally, undeniably revealed. But it gives us something almost as valuable. It gives us permission to question, permission to look at official narratives with skepticism rather than automatic acceptance, permission to ask why timelines don't match and why institutions remain silent when confronted with evidence that contradicts their approved stories. It gives us the beginning of understanding that the version of events we're handed, especially when powerful interests are involved, might be just one version. And the real version, the true version, might be hidden in old magazines and fathers' memories and, medical protocols that don't match the stories we've been told. So here's where we end. Not with answers, but with awareness. The Meghan Markle, who married Prince Harry, who became the Duchess of Sussex, who gave birth to 2 children who are in the line of succession, might not be exactly who we were told she is. Her age might be 6 years greater than officially claimed. Her pregnancy might have been significantly higher risk than the narrative suggested. Her birth story might have been edited to hide complications or accelerate timelines that don't match medical reality. We can't prove these things definitively. Not yet, maybe not ever. But we can see the evidence. We can follow the breadcrumbs Tom Bower laid out. We can ask questions that deserve answers, even if those answers never come. And maybe that's enough. Maybe knowing that official stories can diverge this far from reality, that institutions can maintain narratives this disconnected from documented evidence, maybe that knowledge alone changes how we consume information going forward, how we evaluate claims from powerful people and organizations, how much trust we place in official versions when those versions benefit the people telling them, the age in the magazine that says 21 when it should say 15, the father who says the birth year was adjusted, the medical timeline that doesn't match protocol. These pieces don't give us the complete picture, but they give us enough to know the picture we were shown isn't complete either. And sometimes that's where truth begins, not in definitive proof, but in recognizing that what we thought was solid ground is actually shifting sand. And once you see the ground shift, you can never quite stand on it the same way again. This is Brit Voice Daily, where we examine the stories behind the stories and question the narratives we're told to accept without question.